In the autumn of 1947, the rain over Muskoka didn't fall. It pressed. It came down flat and heavy, the kind that soaked through wool before you knew it was raining, the kind that turned dirt roads into rivers and made the whole county feel like it was sinking slowly into the lake. Walter Gradden had driven that road 100 times. He knew every rut, every soft shoulder, every place where the spruce trees leaned too close and scraped the side of a truck. He wasn't driving fast. He never drove fast. 43 years old, broad through the chest, hands that had spent 2 decades doing work that left marks. Logging, mostly, and before that, the war, and before that, a boyhood in a farmhouse outside Huntsville that no longer stood. He drove with the window cracked even in the rain because he liked the cold air on his face. It kept him awake. It kept him honest. He almost missed her. The shape at the side of the road was dark against dark. A woman crouched over something in the ditch, one arm thrown forward, the other pressed to her side. His headlights caught her for just a second before he braked. The truck slid a little in the mud. He sat there a moment, engine running, wipers sweeping slow. Then he got out. She didn't look up when he approached. She was bent over a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, who lay on his back in the wet grass. Her hands were pressing a folded cloth, her own scarf, to a gash on his temple. The boy was breathing. That was the first thing Walter checked. "What happened?" he said. She looked up then. Rain-soaked hair, a face that had been crying but wasn't anymore. Past crying, into something steadier and colder. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were direct. "The car went off the road," she said. "Back there. My son hit his head. I couldn't carry him." Walter looked back up the road. In the dark and rain, he could just make out the shape of a vehicle tilted hard into the ditch, headlights still on, one pointing at the sky. "Anyone else in the car?" "No, just us." He crouched down beside the boy and looked at the cut. Deep, but not bone deep. The bleeding had slowed. The boy stirred, made a small sound, pressed his face against his mother's knee. "He needs stitches," Walter said. "And to get warm. There's a farmhouse a 1/4 mile up the left fork. That's where I'm going. You're coming with me." She didn't thank him. She didn't argue either. She gathered the boy against her chest, and Walter helped her lift him. And they got him into the cab of the truck, with the heater turned up, and the woman pressed close beside her son. One hand on his cheek the whole drive. The farmhouse had been Walter's uncle's, and then his, and for the last 6 years it had been only his. He didn't talk about why that was. The rooms were clean but sparse. A wood stove in the kitchen that he kept burning because the boiler had given out 2 winters ago and he hadn't replaced it yet. A table with 4 chairs, though only one ever got used. A row of hooks by the door where 3 coats hung, all his in different weights for different cold. He got the boy inside first, laid him on the settee near the stove, and sent the woman. Her name was Helen Marsh. She said it like she was used to saying it in situations she hadn't chosen. To find dry blankets in the cedar chest at the end of the hall. Walter cleaned the cut with what he had in the medicine box, pulled it closed with 2 strips of plaster, and wrapped the boy's head with a length of gauze. The boy's name was Owen. He woke up while Walter was wrapping the gauze and looked at him with eyes that were uncertain but not afraid. "Does it hurt?" Walter asked. Owen considered this seriously. "A little," he said. "Like when you knock your elbow on a door." "Exactly like that," Walter said. "You'll be all right." Helen came back with the blankets and wrapped Owen herself, tucking him in with a precision that looked like something she did often. Not hovering, not anxious, just competent and quiet. When the boy's eyes drifted closed again, she stood and turned to Walter. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was level. There was nothing performative about it. It was just the truth, stated plainly. "There's tea," Walter said. "If you want it." She did. They sat at the kitchen table, the stove ticking with heat, rain still pressing at the windows. Helen held her mug in both hands. She had stopped shivering somewhere between the truck and the kitchen, but she was still very pale. Her coat was hung by the door, dripping. She wore a gray dress beneath it, plain, well-made. The kind of thing a woman wears when she wants to look respectable without wanting anyone to look at her. Walter didn't ask her questions. He refilled his own mug. He listened to the rain. After a while, she spoke. "I was driving to Bracebridge," she said, "to my sister's. I left in a hurry." "He waited. My husband's family," she said, "would like me to not arrive anywhere at all." She said it without heat. That was what stayed with him. Not the words, but the absence of heat in them. Like she'd worn the anger down to something smooth and hard and quiet. He didn't say he was sorry, because she hadn't said it looking for pity. He said, "The roads will be worse by morning. You'll stay." It wasn't a question. It wasn't an offer, exactly. It was just a statement of the obvious. Given the weather, given the boy asleep by the stove, given the fact that her car was in a ditch a quarter-mile back, with its headlight pointed at nothing. Helen looked at him for a moment, measuring. "I won't be any trouble," she said. "I know," he said, and meant it. She slept in the back bedroom, the one Walter used for storage but had cleared once before for a cousin who'd come through during a hard stretch. Owen slept on the settee, one of Walter's old hunting socks over his cold feet because his shoes were soaked through. Walter sat in the kitchen until the fire burned low. He hadn't had a woman in this house since Margaret died. 4 years ago, November. Pneumonia, quick, the way it comes for some people. Wrong weather, wrong week, wrong lungs. He had a photograph of her on the mantel in the sitting room, facing toward the window, because that's where she always used to sit. He didn't look at it every day. Some days he forgot it was there. Some days he couldn't go into the room. He wasn't thinking about that now. He was thinking about the boy's cut, which he was fairly certain would heal cleanly. He was thinking about the road, and what had driven Helen Marsh from a house in such a hurry that she hadn't thought to wait for daylight or better weather. By morning, the rain had thinned to drizzle. Owen woke up and immediately wanted to know if there were animals. Walter told him there was one, a gray barn cat named Dorset, who had never once been friendly to anyone, but who could be watched from the kitchen window if you were patient and quiet. Owen was patient and very quiet. He pressed his small face against the glass for 20 minutes while Walter made porridge. The cat appeared, sat on the fence post, stared back, and eventually retreated into the barn. Owen considered this a great success. Helen came down while Walter was washing the pot. She stopped in the doorway and looked at the scene. Her son at the window, the kitchen warm, the smell of cooked oats, and something moved across her face quickly, like a bird across a clearing. "Sit," Walter said. "There's porridge left." She sat. She helped with the breakfast dishes without being asked. She swept the mud off the mat at the front door. She was not the kind of woman who waited for instructions or who made noise about what she was doing. She moved through the kitchen the way competent people move through unfamiliar spaces, carefully, without apology. Walter went out to check on her car after breakfast. It was worse than he'd thought. The right front wheel was off the road entirely, and the axle had caught on a rock when the car dropped. He'd need to call Henderson in town to come out with the winch truck, and Henderson never came anywhere quickly. He walked back to the house. Owen was on the porch with a stick, poking at the mud in a methodical, scientific way. He looked up when Walter came around the corner. "My mom says we might need to stay another day," Owen said. "That's right," Walter said. Owen went back to the mud. "Okay," he said. That was all. Helen was in the kitchen when Walter came back inside. She had found the flour and was doing something with a bowl and a spoon, moving with a sureness that said she hadn't asked permission and wasn't about to. "You don't have to do that," Walter said. "I know," she said, same way he'd said it last night. Not defiant, just factual. He let her be. The bread came out dense and even, and very good. They ate it at lunch with the last of the cheddar Walter had been saving and some pickled beets from the cellar. Owen ate 2 thick slices and asked if there was more, then said please without being told, and Walter found himself noticing it. The way the boy had manners without seeming to have been drilled into having them. After lunch, Owen fell asleep on the settee again. The bump on his head was coming up in a bruise now, deep purple blue along the temple. But he wasn't dizzy, and he was eating, and he slept easy. Helen sat across from Walter at the table. "Who are you running from?" Walter asked. He asked it plainly, the way he asked most things, with no softening around it. Helen looked at him. "My husband died 8 months ago," she said. "His brother is the executor of the estate. He's contesting the will. He says Owen and I have no claim to the house." She paused. "He's probably right, legally. The lawyers say so. But he also sent 2 men to the house last Tuesday to collect certain items that were my husband's and made it very clear I was not to interfere." "Did you?" The edge of her mouth moved. "I told them they could have the furniture in the study and they were not to touch the piano." Walter considered this. "Did they touch the piano?" "They tried." "What happened?" "I stood in the doorway until they left." He looked at her for a moment. She wasn't performing this. She wasn't making herself into a story for his benefit. She was just telling him what had happened. "What's in Bracebridge?" he said. "My sister has a friend, a solicitor. He thinks there may be grounds to contest the contestation." She said it without much hope in her voice, but also without despair. "I need to get there before Arthur, my brother-in-law, finds out I've gone." Walter nodded slowly. "His name is Arthur Lyle," she said, like she was naming a kind of weather. "He owns half of Parry Sound, and he's used to having it both ways." They sat in silence. Outside, Dorset the barn cat crossed the yard in the thin autumn sun. "Henderson will come out tomorrow," Walter said. "I'll drive you to Bracebridge myself." She started to say something. "It's 40 minutes, he said. "And my truck won't break down in the rain." She closed her mouth. Then she said, "All right." That afternoon, Walter split wood behind the barn, while Helen read to Owen from a book she'd had in her bag. Something about a boy and a river and a great gray goose. He could hear her voice through the window when the wind dropped, low and steady, with the rhythm of someone who had read this book many times before. He split more wood than he needed. That evening, after Owen was asleep, they sat on the front porch in the cold. It wasn't something Walter had planned. He'd come out for air and she'd followed with the last of the tea, and somehow they were both in chairs watching the tree line go dark. "My wife used to sit out here," he said. He hadn't meant to say it. It came out the way things come out sometimes, when it's cold and quiet, and the day is nearly over. Helen didn't express condolence in the usual way. She said, "When did you lose her?" 4 years, November. She nodded once. "The house was quieter after," he said. "I didn't know houses could be quieter than they already were." He paused. "I don't talk about her often." "You don't have to," Helen said. "I'm not asking." He looked at her. "But if you want to," she said. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She liked this porch in the cold better than in the warm. She said the cold made the stars look serious." He looked up. The clouds had pulled back. The stars were out. She wasn't wrong. Helen looked up too. Neither of them spoke for a while. When it got too cold, they went inside. Walter banked the fire. Helen washed the mugs. There was nothing more to it than that, and somehow that was exactly enough. Henderson came the next morning, late, as expected. The winch took 40 minutes and a fair amount of cursing, and when the car came out of the ditch the axle was confirmed, bent past a quick fix. Helen stood and looked at it with her arms crossed, her expression giving nothing away. "I can get a part from Minden," Henderson said. "Maybe Thursday." "Thursday," Helen said. "Maybe Friday." She thanked him. She thanked him the same way she'd thanked Walter, plainly, genuinely, without performance. She was still at the farmhouse when Arthur Lyle arrived. He came in a black car, new enough to look out of place on a Muskoka road. He came in the afternoon of the 3rd day, when Walter was repairing the hinge on the barn door, and Owen was somewhere in the hay, and Helen was in the kitchen making soup from what she'd found in the root cellar. Walter heard the car first. The man who got out was in his 50s, well-dressed, the kind of heavy that comes from eating well and sitting in rooms where other people did the lifting. He stood in the yard and looked at the house and then at Walter. I'm looking for Helen Marsh, he said. Why? Walter said. The man's eyes moved over him. She's my sister-in-law. She's been missing for 3 days. I'm here to take her home. That's not how that works, Walter said. Arthur Lyle blinked. He was not accustomed to that sentence. She's a widow under considerable stress, Lyle said, shifting his tone to something practiced and smooth. And her son needs stability. I'm the boy's uncle. She's not missing, Walter said. Her car went into a ditch in the rain. She's here until it's fixed. Lyle looked at the house. I'd like to speak with her. Walter did not move out of his path. He did not raise his voice. He looked at the man with the same steadiness he used for everything and said, That's her choice. From the porch, Helen had appeared. She stood with her hands in her apron. Owen was beside her, which meant he'd come in from the barn. The boy had a talent for appearing exactly when he was needed and exactly when he wasn't. Lyle's tone shifted again. Helen, I was worried. No, you weren't, she said. He stepped forward. The solicitor you're running to in Bracebridge isn't going to help you. Douglas's wishes were clear, and I am the executor. Douglas's wishes, Helen said, included leaving me the house. I have the letter. Lyle went still. Walter watched the man's face recalculate. What letter? Lyle said. The one Douglas wrote to me 3 weeks before he died. Handwritten, witnessed by 2 people, neither of whom work for you. Helen's voice did not waver. I didn't bring it to the lawyers yet because I wasn't sure it would hold. But Peter Gallant in Bracebridge thinks it will. Lyle looked at Walter, as if Walter were the problem. Walter said nothing. You have no claim here, Lyle said to Walter. I know, Walter said. This is her matter. I'm just standing in my own yard. It was quiet for a moment. A crow called somewhere in the spruce. Dorset appeared on the fence post, looked at Arthur Lyle with the particular contempt that Cat reserved for everyone, and then sat down. Take the letter to whoever you like, Lyle said, finally. His voice was controlled, but something underneath had gone out of it. You'll find the law is more complicated than one handwritten note. Perhaps, Helen said. But I'll find that out in a courtroom, not in my own kitchen, with 2 of your men standing in the hall. Lyle looked at her for a long moment. Then he got back in the car. The car sat in the yard for a moment longer than it needed to. Then it turned around and went back down the road. Owen let out a breath. Was that bad? He said. No, Helen said. That was just uncomfortable. Bad is different. That evening, Walter drove Helen and Owen into Huntsville for supper at the diner on Main Street, because the root cellar was running low and because they'd all needed to leave the house for a while. Owen ordered the hot turkey sandwich and ate it entirely. Helen had soup and toast and a piece of apple pie that she said was better than her own, which Walter believed because she said it with genuine regret. Walking back to the truck, Owen slipped his hand into Walter's without planning it, or without Walter planning it, at least. It lasted about half a block, the distance between the bakery window and the corner where the boys stopped to look at a dog tied to a post. Walter didn't make anything of it. He didn't look down. He just walked. But he felt it. Henderson called Thursday to say the part would be Friday, possibly Saturday. Helen took the call at the kitchen phone, said thank you, and hung up. Saturday, she said. Walter nodded. That night, sitting at the kitchen table after Owen was asleep, Helen set a piece of paper on the table between them. It was a letter, handwritten, 2 pages in a careful, slightly uneven hand. She didn't ask him to read it. She just let it sit there. After a moment, Walter read it. Douglas Marsh had written to his wife 3 weeks before he died. He'd known the end was coming, and he'd written it simply and clearly. The house was hers. The life they'd built was hers. He was sorry it hadn't been easier. He was proud of Owen, and sorry he wouldn't see what the boy became. He loved her without qualification, and had from the beginning, but he was bad at saying it aloud and hoped the written word would hold more than he'd managed to give her in speech. Walter read it twice. He folded it gently and set it down. He sounds like he was a good man, he said. Helen was looking at the table. He was quiet, she said. He didn't fill a room. But when he was gone, you noticed every corner he'd been in. She paused. The kitchen was the worst. Walter nodded once. I know about kitchens, he said. They sat in silence for a while. The kind that doesn't require filling, that two people can sit in without it becoming awkward or tender or anything other than what it is. On Friday, the part came in. On Saturday morning, Henderson brought the car back up the road and parked it in front of the house. He'd done a better job on it than Walter had expected. The man worked slowly but cleanly. Helen packed their things. Owen went to say goodbye to Dorset, who declined to receive him. The boy came back in looking only mildly disappointed. Walter carried the bag to the car. The morning was clear, the kind of October morning that made you think the cold wasn't so bad after all. The trees all bronze and gold against a sky so blue it looked painted. Helen stood by the car door. The solicitor's on Church Street, she said. I have an appointment Monday morning. Let me know what he says, Walter said. She looked at him. Why? It was a fair question. He considered it. Because I'd like to know how it turns out, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, My sister's telephone number is Bracebridge 417. She said it once, clearly, in case the road is bad again. He didn't write it down. She knew he wouldn't have to. Owen came around from the passenger side and stood in front of Walter with his hands in his pockets. Thank you for fixing my head, he said. It mostly fixed itself, Walter said. You did the hard part. Owen considered this. Dorset didn't like me, he said. Dorset doesn't like anyone, Walter said. It's not personal. Does she like you? Walter thought about it honestly. Not particularly, he said. Owen smiled then, a real one, the full-face kind. He turned and got in the car. Helen looked at Walter one more time. The light was coming through the spruce trees at a low angle, the way it only comes in October, and it caught the side of her face and made the tiredness there visible, and also something else, and something that wasn't tiredness at all. Thank you, Walter, she said. He nodded. Drive careful, he said. Watch the left fork. She got in the car and drove down the road, and he stood in the yard until the sound of the engine faded into the trees. He went inside. The house was the same size it had always been. The kitchen had the same corners. Dorset crossed the yard outside and jumped the fence without looking at the window. He made a pot of coffee and sat at the table where they'd sat last night and read the newspaper and let the morning do what mornings do. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was written on stationery with a Bracebridge address in a hand that was tidy and direct, without excessive ornamentation. Peter Gallant believes the letter will hold. The hearing is set for January. Arthur's solicitor has already made a settlement offer, which Peter says means they don't want it to reach a judge. I haven't decided yet. Owen has taken to drawing maps of your property from memory. He's got the barn in the right place, but he's moved the fence post closer to the house. I didn't correct him. The solicitor's office is 2 blocks from a diner with very good pie. Not as good as Huntsville, but respectable. Walter read it at the kitchen table. He read it twice. Then he set it face up on the table and looked at it for a moment. The way you look at something you weren't expecting, but that somehow makes the room feel different once it's there. He got up, found paper and a pen in the drawer by the telephone, and sat back down. He wrote slowly. He wasn't much of a letter writer, but he had things to say, and he said them. And when he was done, he folded the paper and put it in an envelope and addressed it in his plain, undecorated hand. He put on his coat and drove it to the post office himself. January came hard, the way it always does in Muskoka. The lake froze early. The road to town was manageable but not pleasant. Walter did what he always did in winter, cut wood, kept the fire, drove slowly, waited. He received 2 more letters before the hearing. He wrote back to each. On a Tuesday, in the last week of January, the telephone rang. The judge upheld the letter, Helen said. Her voice was the same as always, steady, direct, with no performance in it. The house is Owen's and mine. Walter said, Good. Arthur is furious. Good, he said again. A short silence. Outside the kitchen window, snow was coming down in thick, quiet flakes. Owen wants to know if Dorset is still being unfriendly, she said. Tell him she's consistent, Walter said. He heard something in her voice then. Not quite a laugh, but the shape of one, the sound a person makes when something actually reaches them. We'll be passing through Huntsville in March, she said. Owen wants to try the hot turkey sandwich again. Henderson's will have it, Walter said. I was thinking, she said. We might stop at the farmhouse first, if that's all right. He was quiet for a moment. The snow kept falling. The stove ticked. The left fork, he said. Watch the corner where the spruce leans in. I remember, Helen said. She did. Spring came the way it comes in Muskoka. Not all at once, but in pieces, a slow arrival that earned itself day by day. The snow pulled back from the south-facing slopes first. The creek ran fast and loud beneath the ice before the ice gave way. By the end of March, the yard was mud, then firm ground, and the birch trees at the edge of the property threw their first faint green against a sky that was learning to stay light a little longer. Helen and Owen came on a Saturday. Owen went straight to the barn, not to find Dorset, but to check if his map was right. It turned out the fence post was exactly where Walter had always had it, and the boy stood in the yard, looking between the post and the barn, with the expression of someone whose calculations have been confirmed. Helen stood on the porch with a pot of soup she'd made at her sister's and brought down in a cloth bag, wrapped in a towel to stay warm, because that was the kind of practical, unasked-for thing she did. You didn't have to bring anything, Walter said. I know, she said. He took the pot. She came inside. At supper, Owen talked about his school and a project about the beaver, and how he'd been to the library 3 times and it still wasn't enough. Helen corrected him twice on minor details and let him have the rest. Walter asked questions and meant them. The kitchen was warm and full in a way that wasn't loud, just present, the way a room gets when the right people are in it. After Owen fell asleep on the settee, the same wool socks on his feet because his shoes were muddy, Helen and Walter sat on the porch in the cold again. It was becoming something of a habit. The stars were out. The case is finished, she said. The house is settled. I've started teaching piano again. 3 students so far. Good, he said. Owen wants a dog. He should have one. She looked at the tree line. I've been thinking about what I want, she said, now that there's room to think about it. She paused. That sounds strange. It doesn't, Walter said. She turned and looked at him. Really looked, the way she had in the yard the morning she left. And something in her eyes was different from that morning. Or maybe it was the same but clearer now. The way things look after the weather has finally lifted. I don't want to rush anything, she said. Neither do I, he said. But I'd like to keep coming back, she said, if that's all right. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the road's better in spring. And summer, she said. And summer, he agreed. A long quiet settled between them, the comfortable kind, the kind you don't need to fill or explain. The barn cat appeared at the corner of the porch, sat down, looked at Helen with her usual suspicion, and then, after a long moment, walked 1 step closer. Owen would have been pleased. Some things take root slowly. That's not a flaw. That's just how the strongest ones grow.